In this lesson, we're going to create a bar graph of a data set using Python. So I'm in Trinket right now. I'm going to create a new Python file. And we're going to be using a library called pygal. So I'm going to start by typing in from pygal import. And then with a capital B, I'm going to type the word bar. So this is going to import the bar module that's going to let us create bar graphs. Let's go ahead and enter down. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to set up the object for our bar graph. So I'm going to call this, remember you can name an object what you choose to. It would be a good idea to name it something relevant. So I'm going to name it graph. And I'm going to say it's equal to capital BAR that we imported. And then in parentheses, we give our graph a title here. So title equals. All right. So your title, when you're creating a graph, should be relevant to the data that's going to go on that graph. Since I'm going to be switching between different sets of sample data for this lesson, I might go back and just adjust the title each time we make a change. So for this first sample, we're going to use some football data. So I'm going to start with a title like this, Mahomes and completions and yards 2024. All right, so pretty specific to what we're doing. Oh, and before I move on, I'm going to remember to click that blue save button and to title my work. So right now, we're graphing sports data. And I'm going to click save. All right, so this is going to be saved so far. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use our first method here. So I'm going to say our object name, graph dot, and then I'm going to use the method render, open close parentheses, and click run. Okay, great. So the first part of our project is showing up on screen, essentially right now, just a title. So now we're going to look at how you create your graph and put some data on that graph. So I'm going to go back up to line 3, hit enter 2 times just to space things out. The spacing between the lines right there is not going to make a difference in your program. I just like to kind of chunk things out a little bit so that it's easier for me to read while I'm working. All right. So now we need some data. So what I did was I went to one of our stats websites. So here's the website. Let me see if I can switch screens real quick here. Okay. So now what we're looking at is a data website here. And so if I scroll down a little bit, I looked up Patrick Mahomes. There's a whole bunch of information about him here. I just wanted to pull a couple of data points for my graph. So I was going to see if there was any relationship between number of completions and the number of yards gained by passing in the game. So you can, if you're going, this particular website is kind of nice because it lets me hover over each of these titles. So passes completed, passes attempted. You can see there's a description there that tells you what each of those headers means, because a lot of them are shortened. All right. So a couple ways that you can pull this data. You could just look at each row and then write it down in your program. The other thing you can do on this particular website is you can look for that share and export button. What's nice on this side is if I click modify, export, and share, that first option, it's going to let me select which of these columns I actually want to save. If I don't want to save the whole data set, which I do not, it's a lot of information. So I would go through here and I'm going to delete out these sections here. So this little circle is going to let me delete this line. I'm going to delete completion percentage. Yep. And I'm going to delete pretty much everything after yards for this case. So on here, I can click this little arrow. Yeah, everything's a touchdown. Close that. Let's see, completions, attempts, yards. Okay, I don't need the scores. I don't even need to know who they played. I could keep the dates just in case. Maybe I want to track those dates. I'm not really sure, but at this point, I'm kind of done cleaning up my data set. And so now I'm going to go ahead and click export, and I want to share it as a CSV file. Okay, great. And so now at this point, I have something that I could either copy and paste into my program, or I might be able to like download and save it. But this is a little bit cleaner, a little bit neater for me to use. So I'm going to come back here. Let's take a look. I'm going to switch screens real quick here. Okay. All right. So we're back here on our data. What I ended up doing for my sample was I went through and I added up all the completions for the year. So that was this column here. Oh, switch screens again for you. So if I go back, this column here that has the 18, 16, 29, those are all the completions. I ended up just adding them up by hand. So let me go back here instead. All right, and then we're going to need to put that information in a list. And then what the program will do is read the list, put it on the chart. So I'm going to just type these first lists out by hand. We'll start by giving them relevant names. So one is a list that's going to show the completions. So I'm going to call this M for Mahomes underscore CMP for completions equals. And then the way we format a list is with a square bracket. The first item I'm going to put in this list is the label that I'm going to give this particular bar. So I probably want to call it something that I'll be able to understand later. So Mahomes completions, oops, okay, comma. And then I'll go ahead and put that total number. So if I add it up correctly, it would be 408 was the number. That was like taking that whole list of completions, adding them up. And then the other part I'm going to put here is I decided to graph passing yards. So we'll do yards equals. So I named it M underscore yards because it's Patrick Mahomes passing yards. So square brackets. So I'll label this one Mahomes. Actually, maybe I don't even need his name in this. Let's kind of simplify this a little bit. So completions and passing yards. Okay. All right. And then when I added up those numbers, if I added correctly, that total number was 4,105. But I'm not going to put any commas in that number. Otherwise, it'll confuse our computer with the commas we're using between items on a list. All right. So now we have some information ready to go. What we can do now is we use the add method. And so we're going to say name of our object right here, graph. I'm going to say graph dot, and I'm going to use the method add to say add this data to our bar graph. So add, and then in parentheses, we have to tell it what to add. So we're going to say add the items that are on this first list. So we give it the name of the list, M underscore CMP. And then in programming, items on a list are automatically sort of numbered for us. What is different in our coding language is that the first item actually is numbered as item 0. So this first item here I'm highlighting in the list would be item 0 and then item 1. So what I have to say here is M underscore completion, name of list, square bracket, 0, square bracket. And then I also wanted to put the other item on our list. All right, so let's start by running that. Okay, there we go. So first bar is showing up on our graph. Now let's go ahead and add the other list items as well. I'm going to copy and paste some things here, try to make my work a little easier. So copy graph.add, and then I'm just going to change this to our other list name, yards, yards. Okay, and then let's go ahead and run that new version. There we go. Okay, so there's our first bar graph. I'm going to save my work. And then we're going to look at another way that we can kind of automatically have lists created for us. So if we're importing a bigger set of data, we may not want to be manually creating these lists to go on our bar graph. If it's lots and lots of data, we want to automate that to some extent. So we're going to use a little bit different example here. This is like a little bit shorter, but we're going to put kind of a sample set that was, say, like a little bit longer. I'm going to copy this out of another program I saved here previously. And then what I'm going to do is at the top here, I'm going to click this little plus sign, and I'm going to give my file a name. I want to make sure that it's descriptive of what I'm doing. So I'm going to say SCU soccer. And then I'm going to paste in some data. And so what I have here is I Googled this on the Santa Clara University website. This is their women's soccer team stats from the most recent season. And what I pulled was the player name and their number of goals for the most recent season. So of several of the players and number of goals. And I, again, just pulled that right off the Santa Clara University soccer website. So let's look at how we can, this time around, automate those list creation. Here we had typed everything by hand. We're going to have the computer do some of that work for us. So I'm going to turn off these lines by putting a hashtag out front. Okay. All right, and then run again. If I turned those off properly, I should, kind of clear my screen here. Okay, so next up, we're going to go ahead and use, let's see, go down here, some new information. So this time we're going to say with open, and this is going to tell our computer to open up this file that we just added to the program, this SCU soccer file. So we say with open, and then in parentheses, the name of the file. So it should match exactly, or it's not going to recognize the name. Then we'll say as F. And what we're kind of doing here is setting up a variable. So we're going to say, open up this file, set the data into a variable that we're calling F. And then we're going to loop through all the information there. So we don't want it to just open up and save the first line of data and stop. We want to save the first line of data, do something with it, and then go read the next line, do something with it, go read the next line. So we use a loop to repeat reading the file, and that loop looks like for line in F. And as I'm hitting enter, it's automatically indenting, so make sure your indents stay exactly where they are right now. And let's just start by printing, print the line. And let's see if we can see that. There it is. So I need to pull this up a little to see, but there we go. Good. So it read the data in the file and it printed out all the information that was in that file. So now we're going to add some more to our code here. I'm going to hit enter or return again. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create our list. So we're going to name our list. Again, you could probably name it something relevant. I called it, let's see, let's call it soccer. All right. And we're going to say soccer is going to be equal to line. So that means when we're saying line, we're referring to there's a line, there's a line, there's a line. Okay. So we say soccer is going to equal line dot, and then we're going to use a method called split that's going to take all the information off the line and split it up, break it apart. Okay. And everywhere that it sees a comma, it's going to know that the next item needs to be split from the previous item. Okay, so read each item separately. And then we're going to have to create objects for each of these items on the list here. So let's take a look. For example, the first item that's going to be on the list is going to be the player name. So we're going to set up player equals, and then we're going to say where on our list it's going to be. So let me make a little note here. That's what we're doing. So create the list. All right. And then here, we're going to name each item on the list. So player is going to be referencing the list soccer, and it's the first item. So remember, we number that as a 0. 0. Okay. And then what's next? So next on the list will be these numbers. These are number of goals. So I'm going to say goals equals soccer. That's the name of the list we created. And that's the next item on the list. All right. And then lastly, now we want to tell the computer to put all that on our graph. So I'm going to say, so show it on the graph. Okay. So we're going to say graph.add, same as we did before. And then we're going to tell it to put this item, player, comma, and the goals. We have to do something a little different here because we want it to recognize that goals is going to be a number. So we have to kind of tell it it's going to be a number. And we do that by saying int, short for integer, and then in parentheses, goals. And then close that set of parentheses and also close the larger set of parentheses. Now let's run it and see what that looks like. Put this down. There we go. Oh, and I just noticed I should change the title on my graph to be relevant to the new data. So we'll say SCU Women's Soccer Goals 2024. Let's save and run. Great. And then check out your graph. It's interactive. So if you hover over these bars, it'll give you information about what each bar represents. You can also click on the names in the key here to turn a bar on and off on your graph. So if you want to like narrow down the bars to look at just a couple people in particular, or to look for patterns in some way, you can interact with that graph that you just created.